If there's one thing I should know by now when I read a Malazan book, it is the second half of the book is going to really step it up to much higher levels than the first half of the book. And that's not to say that the first half of Malazan books are bad in any way. Each and every book that I've read so far overall is pretty spectacular. However, Reaper's GALE is the second book now in this 10-book series. This is book 7, where I have actually struggled in the first half of the book. This hasn't happened since Deadhouse Gates, book 2, where that first half of Deadhouse Gates, I was not really sure how I felt about it. But then the second half just kicked it into high gear, and just amazing, amazing storytelling. Same here for Reaper's GALE as well. One of the things that I found very frustrating this time around was the introduction, yet again, of entirely new cultures, entirely new people, entirely new characters, and a big chunk of this book is spent on all of these new people in some way or another. So we had some of my absolute favorites in this book. Tehol and Bug in the Lothari capital. Just give me a Malazan book that's like 800 pages of Tehol, Bug, and Kruppa, and I'm happy. So I was super, super happy to see us return back to Tehol and Bug from where we left off with them. I believe it was in Midnight Tides. So I know there are some characters that are hit or miss for people. I'm a big, big, big fan of their whole kind of plot that's been going. Just really, really enjoyed how it's all turned out. Now, I don't know if we're done with their story arc or if we're just done with what maybe Act 2 and there may be a final act for them. I don't know yet, but I was really, really happy to see them in this book. This is in many ways Reaper's GALE, a sort of the continuation from Midnight Tides, because we're back to a lot of the characters that we know from that book are still here, the ones that are still around. We have Rulad Sengar, who's now this sort of just miserable, miserable emperor. I mean, you want to see a character that just suffers nonstop in a fantasy story, who is paying a just huge price for what he's achieved. Rulad Sengar is that character. He's really, really interesting because he does horrible things and he just indiscriminately kills, but he's so broken and just miserable, and he's trapped in this sort of deal that he made that I don't think he's very happy he actually ended up making. He's a really, really fascinating character. He's one of the centerpieces of this overall story in Reaper's GALE. I liked this stuff with this whole Sengar family. I liked Tehol and Bug. I liked, of course, more Karsa Urlong, more Ikariam, and this confrontation we've been sort of moving towards that we got, but not really the way I expected it to go. Really interesting choices made by Stephen Erickson here in how that confrontation actually plays out. However, a large part of this book was spent following characters that, I don't know. I mean, they were fine characters. Red Mask is an interesting character, but I imagine you could have taken that whole subplot completely out of this book, and I don't know that it would have made any difference to the overall story. It was hundreds and hundreds of pages of this Red Mask and this all people, a whole new continent of people, a whole new civilization kind of walk on the screen. And we have this Red Mask character who's sort of mysterious. No one really knows who he is or where he came from, but he's sort of gathered all the disparate tribes that are scattered all over this continent and brought them all back under his banner to bring them back to glory. Who knows if there's any way they could actually win this, but they're determined, Red Mask is determined to basically purge this continent of all non-all people. There's a Lothari army that we're following. These two are building up to a confrontation and a clash, and they have multiple battles throughout the book until they get to the final battle between these two. And all of that stuff by itself, I enjoyed. Interesting. The characters on both sides were interesting, seeing their different tactics and choices they make, and how hubris can play a role on both sides. Was all on its own, on its face, really good. Is it something I wanted in book 7 of a 10-book series that's 10,000 pages long? Probably not. So we're at what, 6, 7, 8,000 pages into this story. And I just kind of struggled getting pulled into this whole, oh, here's a whole new thing and a whole new people that you're going to spend a lot of this book with. So it just didn't work for me this time. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just I want to get to, I want to get to the sauce, the meat. We have this Karsa Orlong, Akarium, and Rulat Sengar have all ended up in the same place. You're expecting, is this city even going to be standing by the time this battle between these three is done? And that's what I wanted to get to. And I think that was probably a large part of my frustration, is this wasn't bad at all. It's just not what I was expecting, not what I wanted. So it's maybe far more on me in terms of how I felt about this book. And I have a feeling there are things in this book that happened that I didn't really catch. And that's one of the reasons why the people who are just fanatics about this series reread this series, because there's so much happening across all these thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. And something might happen in book 2 or book 3, and here it is 7,000 pages later, and oh, this thing pops back up again. And now you see what that was about and why it's important to the story going forward. So I know there's things in here that I'm not catching, because this is such a vast storyland, vast world that is presented across this whole Malazan series. It's hard to really catch things. And when you sometimes have characters pretending, you don't realize who they even are, because they'll kind of appear with a different name and a different form because they're up to something they maybe don't want other people to catch them doing. So it really makes it a little difficult to wonder, like, is what you're even seeing what's really happening? So I imagine through each of these books so far, there are things I just haven't caught, and that a reread would go, oh, now I see. I don't know if I'm ever going to reread this, but only because it's just so massive and there's just so little reading time that I don't know if I'll ever get back around to rereading the whole series. All of that said, this book did what each Malazan book does. You suddenly pass some unseen sort of like Rubicon or something. It's like you're on the slow rising roller coaster, and then it hits that peak, and then it's a wild, crazy ride through the rest till you get to its end. For me, I would say the first half of this book is probably like a 3.5 star book for me. But then again, that's just me, just kind of like wanting to get to the main stuff. So it might actually be better than a 3.5, but that's kind of how I felt as I was kind of hitting that halfway point. The second half of the book, the last 550 pages thereabouts, just 5 stars, easy for me. Something happened and that high gear kicked in, and then I found myself on Sunday, a couple of days ago, reading the last like 700 pages straight through. Just that was my day. I couldn't stop reading. I couldn't put it down. And it just gripped me all the way through those last 700 pages. And this is like a 1,265 page book or something. Now, one thing this book does that I'm kind of happy about is we get the closure on some stories, closure on some characters. Some characters, their stories end here. Pretty heavy hitters are removed from the chessboard. And it's nice to see that happen, because we're starting to get deep into this story now. There's only 3 more books to go in this main 10-book series. Now, there's, I think, like 24 Malazan books altogether, but this 10-book main series, there's just 3 more books to go. So it's not surprising that we're finally getting some pretty big pieces taken off the board. I'm not going to say who they are. This is a semi-spoiler, maybe non-spoiler review, however you want to classify this. I'm not going to give like specific spoilers like that, though. And then we have a very unexpected turn of events for this fight that's been building. We discover Ikariam has come to the Letheri capital for his own reasons. He hasn't actually come for this fight. Now, maybe that was his intention heading there, but when he got there, he realized he had an entirely different purpose for being there. He and Karsa Orlong have this moment in the street of the city, and they're like looking at each other, and something passes between them, this is slightly spoiler here, but something passes between them where Karsa Orlong realizes, oh, okay, you're not here for me. And then they go their own ways. And Ikariam then goes and does something really, really interesting. And no idea what actually happened, what it is that he did means, but I'm sure it's going to play a pretty important role in how this whole story turns out. Because there's something that we are only now really beginning to realize about things that are scattered throughout this whole world. And this is for me at least, maybe it's just my first time really catching it. Oh, this isn't just relics or ruins from an ancient, long ago gone, like civilization that predated these empires. This stuff is still here for a reason. And we're beginning to see like the start of what that reason might be. It was really, really interesting how his story in just this plot in the book for Ikariam, how it went and where it might be going. And then we had the confrontation between Karsa Orlong and Rulad, the emperor. The Tista Ador, I think he is, who's ruling over the conquered Lethari Empire. As for that fight between Karsa Orlong and Rulad, that did not go in any way I expected it to. It was really good. I really enjoyed what ended up happening, but completely not what I pictured at all in my mind happening at all. Just so totally different. And I actually like that. Now, there might be people who might be disappointed in that fight and how it played out, but I actually really loved it because it was so unexpected. Because, you know, all the things you're imagining is going to go down between these two. And the way it plays out, you're like, I did not see that happening at all. So I was really happy that that's what Erikson decided to write. And I'm curious to see where that's going to go from there. There are characters that are gone now, and I'm assuming they're not going to be brought back by some god. Don't know, because that's a thing that happens in this series. We had the return of a character we lost quite a while ago, which is really cool. I don't really see that some of the characters who were taken off the field, which appears to be permanently, I don't see any need for them to really be brought back by any of these gods or anything. But you never know. Now, things that I really liked in this. Bridge Burners, we got Fiddler. The Bone Hunters now is kind of the incarnation that has some of the remnants of the Bridge Burners in it. We also got to follow what Quick Ben has been up to, and Troll Sengar, Silchus Ruin, Mandarake's brother, and dragons, and we got Kachain Tamal back, which, if you don't know, there are velociraptors with blades for like arms and stuff in this story. They're one of the strange, like, sort of ancient races that pop up sporadically. There's really, really cool stuff in Malazan, things that you don't normally find in a regular fantasy story. You don't see velociraptors with blades for arms running around chopping people's heads off in battle. One of the really cool, unique things about the Malazan books. Anytime we get any of the Bridge Burners, I'm very, very happy. I got my fill of Fiddler. You know, it's nice to be back because we saw him with the Bone Hunters and everything, which is a brilliant book, which I think was just the book right before this, now that I think about it. But I read Return of the Crimson Guard in between. So it was 2 books ago for me. Anytime we get them, any of the Whiskey Jack's people, I'm happy. You know, I want as much of them. That's our original crew. So I want as much of the ones that are left on that page. And we got plenty of that in this book. We got Fiddler and his team. Getting to see more and more of Quick Ben being a lot more than he seems, having a lot more to him. It's just nice little like glimpses of just kind of what level that man is at in terms of power. Some other stories, like with the more like wilder kind of life, like beings and things, kind of appear to be wrapped up as well. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, and Beak, that strange, weird little mage, kind of another new character that kind of just pops up and just has such an amazing like story arc here. He's my like surprise, and really like wonderful surprise in this book. There's one scene in particular where he's just one of my favorite characters in the story. He's one of the characters I'm going to take away from this whole read through is Beak. and what he does here. Don't want to spoil it. That whole crew, again, now they're mostly known as the Bone Hunters that have kind of circled around and attached themselves to Fiddler. They're a really great crew, and just give me them. Give me them. Just keep giving me their story. Overall, again, such an amazing ending. I just want to keep going after that really slow start. And I mean, I struggled. I stopped and started this book multiple times, and it took probably quite a few months just to get through those first 400 or 500 pages. And then, like I said, I sat down and read 700 last pages, boom, in one shot. That was all I did that Sunday, from after eating breakfast all the way through till just past midnight. I just was determined to finish that book because it just took off and just gripped me. Now, all of that said, I gave this book 4 stars overall. Maybe 4.5 stars I would give it, somewhere in that vicinity, because the first half I would give maybe 3.5, and the second half was 5-star, absolutely. But a bit of an overall step down from the last couple of books. Midnight Tides and Bone Hunter, which preceded this, those are both 5-star reads for me. So it's hard to keep that 5-star across the whole book level going. This one did it for the second half, but just not the first half. I hope we're done having entirely brand new cultures and civilizations and like cast of characters being introduced, but this is probably what I should just expect every single book. Even all the way into the last book, I should probably just expect new things to just suddenly pop up. This would have been a better book, in my opinion, if you just dropped the whole Red Mask all Lothari like back and forth. You cut out like 300 or 400 pages, and it would have been such a tight book. Probably would have been another 5-star book overall for me. And again, none of that stuff was bad. It's just, I was just eager, I think, to get to what I wanted to get to. So it was more maybe me problem, because some people absolutely loved this book. And for them, having all this whole new thing dropped on them wasn't a problem. Didn't like pull them away like it did for me. Toll of Hounds is up next, and I am eager to get the main Malazan Book of the Fallen series done. I still have 4 more of Ian Esselmont's companion books to go, but I want to get the 3 main ones on the books and done so I can close out the main part of this series, and then I can read those sort of companion books to fill in like the outsides and the seams, as at my leisure, because I also really want to get to Cosmere. That's next, so I'm eager to get there because I've been with this Malazan series for a couple of years now. It's time to finish it out, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to Toll of the Hounds. Where it's going to start? Are we going to start with any of these characters? Are we going to be maybe someone we saw in book 2, book 3? Who knows? That's one of the interesting things about Malazan is you never know what each book is really going to concentrate on because it's such a large landscape. I highly recommend this series if you're a fantasy fan. And like I mentioned in one of my videos, I think my Q&A video, which I'll link up here, it's a massive undertaking. And if you like big door-stopping fantasy, highly, highly recommend it. Wheel of Time is an appetizer to Malazan, just to put it in perspective. So it is an undertaking, but if you're up to it, go for it. There's so much rich storytelling and characters that you're just going to fall in love with and want just to keep following forever. I have similar discussion views to some degree for Memories of Ice through Bone Hunters, so you can find them in a playlist here at the end and other stuff that YouTube will recommend.